The first time the HOA fined me 50 grand, I laughed. Not because it was funny, though, in its absurdity it almost was, but because I couldn't imagine a pack of retirees in pastel polos truly believing they could bankrupt me over a wall of dirt, steel, and concrete that kept their streets from drowning every spring. Months later, I stood on my porch watching those same streets turn into rivers, neighbors knee-deep in filthy water. Roland, the almighty HOA president, shouting orders like a general in retreat. That's when I knew they hadn't just destroyed my dam, they'd destroyed themselves. I built that dam 5 years earlier after moving back to Cedar Valley. The culverts and ditches here hadn't worked in decades, and every heavy rain sent runoff surging into garages, basements, and lawns. The county had no money for upgrades, the HOA certainly didn't, so I did what my father would have done, I fixed it myself. I poured concrete welded steel and carved out a spillway with my own hands. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. The water calmed, the neighborhood stayed dry, and life went on until Roland decided my solution didn't fit the HOA handbook. The letter came by certified mail, thick paper stamped with their crest like it was some royal decree. Unauthorized dam structure, it read. Immediate removal required. Fine, $50,000. Roland's signature at the bottom like a judge's gavel. I pinned it to the fridge under a trout magnet and stared at it over coffee. 50 grand for protecting their homes. It was laughable. But it wasn't just about money. It was a message. We control this neighborhood, not you. I went to the next HOA meeting. The clubhouse reeked of stale coffee and cheap carpet cleaner, a dozen residents shuffling papers like they were attending a state trial. Roland stood tall behind a podium, square-shouldered hair-slicked back glasses perched like armor. Item 3, he announced unauthorized dam structure. Heads turned. Whispers hissed. I raised my hand. Curious, I said, how my dam is unauthorized when it's on my property and it keeps your streets from turning into canals every spring. Silence fell. Roland adjusted his glasses. It's unsightly. It disrupts the neighborhood's aesthetic. It was not approved. I leaned back, voice calm, but cutting. So you'd rather kayaks on Cedar Lane than a view you don't like. The room rippled with murmurs. Roland slammed his gavel. This is not a debate. The fines will stand. And that was it. Outside, Dennis' wiry 60-something always spitting sunflower seeds caught up with me. You sure stirred the pot in there, he said. I shrugged. They poked the bear first. He grinned, but his warning hung in the air. Careful. That bear's got claws. The next week, the claws came out. Carol from the compliance committee patrolled my property visor-sharp clipboard tighter than a Bible. She scribbled down violations. Grass too tall. Wrong fencing material, suspicious storage of equipment. Suspicious. My tractor wasn't a meth lab. But that didn't matter. They weren't after truth. They were after control. Each letter stacked higher on my fridge a collage of threats and fines until my kitchen looked like a museum of bureaucratic insanity. I kept a calm face, but inside the doubt gnawed. At night, staring at those papers, I wondered if maybe I was wrong. Maybe I should just tear it down, avoid bankruptcy, keep my head low. I'd faced mortars and gunfire overseas, but here I was nearly broken by a stack of paper. The thought made me sick. Still, the fear was real. What if they buried me in lawsuits? What if I lost everything? Then came the storm. Black clouds stacked like artillery shells, rain hammering the roofs, thunder shaking the valley. My dam usually held the chaos back like a patient hand, but that night I opened the sluice just a little wider. By dawn, Cedar Lane was ankle-deep in water. Mailboxes leaned, lawns drowned Roland out in boots, shouting orders no one could follow. I stood at my fence, sipping coffee from a thermos silent. Sometimes silence says more than any speech. The next letter wasn't a fine, it was a summons. The HOA was suing me for endangerment, demanding damages and an injunction. Dennis shook his head. They'll bleed you dry, he warned. Maybe I thought. Or maybe they'd just dug their own grave. Because I knew something Roland didn't, the county had already signed off on my dam years ago. It was legal functional, and the only thing standing between his kingdom of cul-de-sacs and disaster. When the county engineer came to inspect, he confirmed it out loud. "Honestly, your dam is the only reason that subdivision hasn't washed away." That was the turning point. Roland thought he had me cornered, but his arrogance had just triggered the one ally who mattered: local government. Still, the war escalated. The HOA flooded the neighborhood with newsletters painting me as a menace. Carol cornered me while I mowed the lawn, shoving another threat in my face. "You'll bankrupt yourself fighting us." I shut off the mower, leaned on the handle, and said, "Or maybe you'll bankrupt yourselves chasing a fight you can't win." She stomped off heels, sinking into the soft ground. I knew patience would be my blade. The breaking point came when demolition day arrived. Roland and Carol paraded around like Victor's neighbors. Clapped kids sat on bikes watching county crews bite into the dam with backhoes. I raised my coffee thermos in salute as concrete cracked water roared forward and the valley's shield crumbled into rubble. Roland clapped once loud enough for the crowd. Good riddance. That night, rain came heavy, the kind that makes the air green and still. By midnight, the creek surged, unchecked storm drains, overflowed lawns, disappeared. By dawn, Cedar Lane was underwater cars bobbing like toys, garden gnomes floating like refugees, families huddled on porches staring out at the chaos. Roland screamed orders, voice ragged, but the water didn't listen. Carol waited past visor. Dripping mascara smeared like war paint. She screamed at me. "This is your fault." I raised my mug. "Correction. This was your idea." The irony burned through the neighborhood. Insurance companies called it negligence, self-inflicted damage. Residents turned on each other, shouting at emergency meetings held in flooded clubhouses, demanding to know why the dam had ever been removed. Fingers pointed, alliances crumbled, and Roland's gavel cracked against the table like a desperate insect. I didn't even attend. I didn't need to. They were devouring themselves. Lawsuits piled up not against me, but against the HOA. Families sued insurance companies, denied claims. Contractors demanded payment. Board members resigned one by one until only Roland remained stubborn and red-faced. He tried rallies, flyers, even starting a Facebook group to save the neighborhood. But his voice was just noise now. The county, meanwhile, planned a new dam. Bigger, stronger, official, and the cost, not mine. Every homeowner in Cedar Valley would pay for it through taxes and assessments. The same people who cheered when my dam was torn down now had to fund the replacement. Roland raged, even tried to sabotage the construction, caught in the act with a crowbar under the rain. Deputies dragged him out soaked and screaming into the back of a cruiser. His mugshot, wild-eyed dripping, was plastered across local news. Former HOA president arrested for sabotage. At his trial, the evidence was overwhelming. Photos of the damage, eyewitness reports, even his own social media rants. The jury didn't take long. Guilty, 18 months in prison, permanent ban from ever leading an HOA again. I didn't cheer, I didn't gloat. I just sat in the courtroom, calm as ever, letting out a slow breath. Roland was finished. The HOA shattered, the streets scarred. The new dam rose behind them, poured in stone, proof that arrogance and control crumble when nature and patience decide otherwise. Patience isn't weakness. It's a flood you release at the right time.